You are now the COO of LFG.
What led you to LFG? What attracted you?
So many people talk about being short-term pessimistic about Britain, but long-term optimistic. And the only way that you can reconcile those two statements is if something changes. And seeing from afar what LFG had done made me believe that LFG is part of what is going to happen to reconcile those two things and reach an inflection point.
What is Y Combinator, and what attracted you to apply for the scheme, having been in a UK startup?
So Y Combinator is probably the world's most celebrated and original startup accelerator. Their first batch of companies way back in the day would have included companies like Reddit, companies like Airbnb, companies like Dropbox. It's inspiring. You're kind of surrounded by people who have achieved a huge amount. Henry, my co-founder, managed to charm our way into getting some FaceTime with Sam Altman himself. Tell me what you building. So I'm pitching my heart out. Right, this is the most important pitch I'm ever going to make. Get the climactic bit of the pitch. And we kept going, right? We kept going. But when I left the room, I was like, was that normal? Yeah. And he goes, this is Silicon Valley. If you can't stand some kind of fairly brusque manners, you've got no business being out here. There's a 15-minute clip of us in the Dragon's Den. At one point very early on, Peter Jones said, how much did you give to Y Combinator? If I say 7%, he's just going to say, I want 7% too. And we both said, we gave him 7%. And Peter Jones said, good lads, because if you'd lied to me, I'd have sent you straight out of that lift. I know Y Combinator, I know the terms.
Will Hodson, welcome to the LFG podcast.
Great to be here, hello.
Great to have you on. You are now the COO of LFG. So some of our listeners will know who you are. But for those that don't, would you please give us a brief overview of your history and how you've come to join LFG?
That's such a polite way of saying the majority of listeners have not got a Scooby-Doo who you are. Introduce
well,
yourself.
They're about to.
Well, so I'm very proud to be following in the footsteps of so many illustrious guests on this podcast. And I think it's absolutely appropriate that I explain who I am. So before I became COO at LFG, I guess I was an entrepreneur. I ran a business with my co-founder called Look After My Bills, and we managed to sell it to Go Compare in 2019.
Who was your co-founder?
My co-founder was a guy called Henry Dezoot, who was formerly the Prime Minister's Special Advisor on AI. He also worked in the coalition government in education with Michael Gove and Dominic Cummings, and is one of the best guys you could hope to meet. So I ran a business with him for 7 years, huge fun, ended up selling it to Go Compare in 2019. But before that, I guess what was notable was, first of all, we went through Y Combinator, which was dream come true for an early stage entrepreneur. And then, slightly less credibly, slightly less cool, but really effective, we went on to Dragon's Den, where, don't like to mention it too much. We did achieve the best deal in the history of the show at that time. So it was an amazing, rip-roaring ride to be on with one of my best friends I know for most of my life, which had more or less a happy ending as well.
I guess because, can you explain a bit more about what it's looking for? Look After My Bills.
Yeah. So Look After My Bills. Look After My Bills was Britain's preeminent energy auto-switching service. So we were like a price comparison engine, but where a price comparison engine would switch your energy to a cheaper provider once, and then when the contract expires, you're on your own, and invariably you get ripped off because the price goes back up. Look After My Bills provided a solution to that. We said, look, when your contract expires and your provider tries to put your price up, we're going to go back to the market, find the cheapest deal that we can find, and switch you again. Mm-hmm. So you're going to minimize your bills every year automatically. And the public liked it, right? So we grew to nearly 1 million members, and everything was going swimmingly. We sold to Go Compare, and the whole raison d'etre for the service, right, was there are too many energy companies. There's too much choice. I can never choose as a punter between 75 different energy companies. I need someone to do it for me. Sold to Go Compare, did our earn out, and then the energy market collapsed like a house of cards. Gas crisis meant that so many energy companies went out of business, and all of a sudden there was only 5, 6, 7, 8 to choose from. The switching market as we knew it no longer existed. So we had fundamentally had completely unknown to us the most fortuitous timing we could have had for our business, which, let's be honest, besides all of the hard work and the resilience that you need as a startup, as an entrepreneur, we had a lot of luck.
Where did you and Henry get the idea from?
Well, the first thing to say, right, is there's there's not really a new idea under the sun. So Henry and I you can go two ways. We could squabble about who came up with turning a switching service into an auto switching service first. And we do, right? I've literally gone over the emails during lockdown. It's like, who actually did come up with the idea? And I found conclusive proof. I suggested it to him first. But the point is, before I suggested it to him, or he suggested it to me, let's say, it could have gone either way, there's no doubt that many other people would have had the same idea, talked to friends at parties about it, just stated it in a kind of special ops within a price comparison engine company. But the point is, it's not about having the idea. It's about executing it. And in the end, when we sold and we had something like a success in the business, there were several other auto switching companies, right? And if you spoke to their founders, they'd probably say, those guys running Look After My Bills, that wasn't the best service. But we had the most users, because we were the most focused on executing a product that appealed to our users. And that was, in many ways, a legacy of having gone through Y Combinator, where the first thing you see when you walk through the door into this aircraft hangar-like space is this motto that says, build something people want.
And can you go in a little bit more about Y Combinator? Because I know many people who listen to the podcast will know what it is, but especially when you went through it, right, in 2018, it was relatively still unknown if you were out and not within the kind of startup or early stage scale up business space. Like, what is Y Combinator, and what attracted you to apply for the scheme, having been a UK startup?
So Y Combinator is probably the world's most celebrated and original startup accelerator. In other words, they would incubate promising young founders, young companies, and try to add value to them and collide them together in their ideas so as to make promising companies great companies. Their first batch of companies way back in the day would have included companies like Reddit, companies like Airbnb, companies like Dropbox. Sam Altman, who is now one of the world's most famous and recognized entrepreneurs, he actually started as a YC founder, went on to become YC president, and is now doing all those things like OpenAI. So that's why for a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, Y Combinator is this kind of holy grail. You really want to be in that environment. So it's based in Silicon Valley, Mountain View, but also San Francisco. You want to be around people who think that big, and you want to test your mettle against some of the best brains in the world, right? If you kind of work in politics, you want to be in Westminster or Washington, DC. If you're in film, you want to be in Hollywood. And I think for a lot of people who, if you work in tech, the lure of being in Silicon Valley is so strong. And this was probably when it was peak tech, right? So 2018 was an amazing time to be in San Francisco for lots of reasons.
What's it like being around so many kind of, because I always find founders are interesting types of people. They dream big, but almost crazily, right? And have a high risk appetite. What's it like being around so many people like that?
I mean, it's inspiring. You're kind of surrounded by people who have achieved a huge amount, people who have absolutely bewilderingly large visions and dreams. And the first thing you have to deal with when you go to Y Combinator is imposter syndrome. It's the first thing they say to you. They say everyone who comes to Y Combinator has imposter syndrome. Second thing I want to say is Henry and I really were imposters, right? we really were. And the reason was we were not technical, right? Neither one of us was technical. We had a promising business and a good idea, and we had some traction behind us, but we were not technical founders. And we also had a product which was only realistically ever going to work in a British market, right? The energy switching market is something that is very particular to the UK. In California, you can't even switch your energy, right? So you talk to investors, and they kind of went a little bit glassy-eyed when we talked like that, which is a huge challenge.
Yeah.
Because every time you talk to anyone at Y Combinator, they literally have a class held by the guy who built Gmail, and he said, here's how to turn any business idea into something which is worth $100 million, right? And he said, if you can't think that big, you've no business really being in Y Combinator. And I always remember one of the first kind of collective communal exercises we did at Y Combinator in our batch. It's like, right, everyone, there's like 100 companies. Everyone line up, you're going to do a 30-second pitch about what your company does, who you are, what your company does. And Henry and I have been like, okay, we've been taught to think big. We're thinking big here, we're thinking big. So we're going down there, we're going snaking down the queue, and then someone stands up, it's our turn. He goes, hi, I'm Will, this is Henry, we look after my bills. We minimize the price that you pay for essential utilities every year, and then together, automatically. And like, we absolutely killed it, fantastic. And the guy's like, there's like a hush. And I'm like, oh, wow, these guys thinking big. Next guy step up. Hi, I'm Mike, and this is Bob. We are Nectome. We're going to freeze your brain when you die and bring you back to life in a sweet, sweet robot body. And Henry and I thought, well, maybe we weren't quite thinking. Right? But that's the level of ambition that you see. That's obviously Nectome. I think they're still going, but they got investment from Peter Thiel, and that was the level. That was typical for Y Combinator, right? Then you get sorted into these tutorial groups. So in our tutorial groups, we had, first of all, like not just really intelligent founders, really good folk, and folk who want to help, right? This feeling that you have when you're in tech, which is you're all in the same industry, but you're not really rivals. All of you are up against the incumbent in your space. You're not really up against the rival in the same, in your same office, right? So everyone kind of helps each other. It's a really nice thing about being in tech. You have the same thing in Y Combinator, and that's the essence of their tutorial groups. So one of our tutorial groups, we had like the founders of Soylent. Soylent, they were the original Huel.
Green.
Sorry?
Is in green, Soylent Green. Is that what it's named after? Probably.
Yeah, that's it. That's right. So that was basically, it was Huel before Huel. And the founders for those guys who had been a huge success.
See why they changed the name.
That's it. It was a controversial name, but those are amazing like operators. Yeah. And you got to hang out with them every day.
Were there any Brits on the course, or just you guys?
There were Brits. So there was one called Let's Do This, who is an amazing company. I think Alex Rose and Sam Brown, they're two of the most impressive founders you would have seen at YC. So I was proud that they were, our fellow Brits. Those guys really, really, really made the most of Y Combinator. They met everyone in Silicon Valley. They got lots of amazing investment. And that was the aim of the game, right? It's kind of it's described a couple of ways. One is your 4 months at Y Combinator is the most highly leveraged quarter of your life, because if you do it right, you can raise a huge amount of money and secure your runway for your business at the most crucial moment. So probably the most important thing is to secure investment, but most of all is to secure signal investment. Signal investment being, I've got investment from the person that everyone follows. If they're invested, I want to invest.
I guess that's quite similar to Dragon's Den and the way they operate, right?
It is, but
because it's like you're signaling you've got these big names in business, and it's kind of been televised and what have you.
Yeah, always signal investments is always in your mind when you're running a business, right? But so at that time at Y Combinator, the signal investment you really wanted was from Sam Altman. So Sam Altman at that moment was president of YC. And because Henry, my co-founder, such a good operator, such a good networker, he managed to charm our way into getting some FaceTime with Sam Altman himself. Here we go. It was tough for us, right? It was tough because not technical, didn't have a product that had a huge universal market, and yet there we were, going to Sam Altman's office in San Francisco with our chance to pitch. And this is where I thought of the words. It's like, this is the most highly leveraged moment of your startup career. Let's make it count. So go into the office. Sam's like, hey guys, how you doing? Oh no, great. Yeah, great. Walks around, sort of looks at a couple of pictures, sits down behind his desk. So tell me what you are building? So I start pitching, and Sam's just across the desk and we're at the side, start pitching this, and I'm pitching my heart out. Right, this is the most important pitch I'm ever going to make. So we are building a tool that minimizes the price you pay for all essential services every year automatically. And Sam's like, yeah, he's nodding, and I keep going. The market's amazing. It's going to keep on growing. This point, Sam's like, put his hands behind his back. He's like leaning back in his chair, like he's really enjoying it. So I keep going and get to the climactic bit of the pitch. And as I get there, out of the corner of the eye, I see Sam's right foot come up on the desk. Left foot comes up on the desk. And for the rest of the pitch, I'm just pitching into the soles of his shoes as he has his feet in my face just across the desk, right? And we kept going, right? We kept going. And he was like, you had no choice. We had to keep going with the pitch. But when I left the room, I was like, was that normal? Yeah. And he goes, this is Silicon Valley. If you can't stand some kind of fairly brusque manners, you've got no business being out here. We went back and we told our partner, like at YC, who had helped us get the meeting. We said, yeah, Dalton, look, we had that meeting with Sam. I know you've talked to us about not being so English, but that really wasn't cricket. He's put his shoes up in the face. He goes, guys, looked completely blank. He was like, what's the problem? He said, it didn't work out. I've got another one. Why don't you meet the CEO of Groupon? I was like, wow. So Groupon had been this huge business. It kind of gone south when they listed, but huge business, amazing founder. And he goes, I know Andrew Mason. He's the CEO of Groupon. Don't worry about Sam. He's like this busy guy. He's got lots of things on his desk. Don't I know it? And he goes, I'm going to set you with Andrew Mason, see how you go. Next day, this is the magic of Y Combinator. Next day, we are in Andrew Mason's personal office, downtown San Francisco. Hey, so he goes around, looks at his pictures. So what are you guys building? Sits down behind his desk. It's like, well, we're building something which I think is going to resonate strongly with you as Groupon, because we like to leverage collective bargaining to get the best deals we can for people on essential services. It's good. I keep going. And what's more, the market's huge and it's just begun. It's going to grow. Because I great. Corner of my eye. Right foot comes up, left foot comes up. So again, I'm just pitching my heart out into the soles of a giant entrepreneur's shoes. And that is actually kind of the experience of an entrepreneur trying to raise funds a lot of the time, right? You go there to pitch your heart out. You land into the soles of someone's shoes.
In the US, though, I'm like I would be, and I think this is why I'm quite keen on. A lot of people talk about emulating, transplanting like Silicon Valley and just bringing it over to the UK. And I think we can make it a British cultural victory and kind of have the startup scene look more British.
Quite possibly.
Makes sense.
Quite possibly. I mean, I think, but the fact is, this the same culture is incredibly helpful, incredibly supportive. No bullshit. It's basically no bullshit. And for a lot of people, there's a blend, there's a balance, right, between. I mean, they were polite, right? Apart from Americans like putting their shoes on their desk quite a lot. I'm personally appalled by it, but that's what they do. So you can't get upset about it. And the main thing was, got some of his time, learned a lot of his opinions about stuff via YC. And what I think most founders would say is, I would take that and a polite no within 20 minutes over endless kind of prevarication and just stay in touch and give us a date.
The polite,
sometimes
we'll get back to you.
Yeah, it's sometimes nice to just have that feedback, right? Yeah. They're very clear cut. This is what we're getting. There's different ways of delivering it. I'll be interested from a Y Combinator side of anyone who works in startups, etc. You try and if you don't go to Y Combinator for whatever reason, or you don't try, there's lots of stuff where people try and feed out information about watch this seminar, or there's a cheat sheet about what they teach you at Y Combinator. From what you're saying, and seems to be the kind of experience of people I've talked to who have gone to Y Combinator, it's the network effects which is actually the most valuable thing, right? You're in that environment with a supportive group of people, and you have access to so many people who are interested in potentially investing within SF. That's where the true value comes from. And but on the flip side of that, did you find that there were kind of ways they taught you things they said, or as you mentioned, the Gmail guy who was 100 million, this is what you should be aiming for? Were there tricks and kind of tricks of the trade they taught you which you're like, oh, this is kind of invaluable? Or is it really that network effect which is the thing that matters?
It's a fair question. I mean, I think that Michael Seibel, who was CEO at Y Combinator when we were there, he said, look, you're not going to become a different entrepreneur during your time at YC, you're going to become the James Bond version of yourself, which is an amazing thing to say, given how problematic England's finest spy might be for some people in California. But I think the way you became a better version of your former self was just by never letting your ambition slip, because there was a ratchet provided by the ambition of those around you. People just thinking bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's a kind of, there was a sort of the concentric circles of those ambitions flowing into each other was what kind of pushed everything up. And that defines, to a large extent, I think, the San Francisco tech ecosystem. The constant search for a big idea and the pursuit of like executing it better than anyone else, only interested in huge markets that could change everything. And I think what I learned there was you could see a culture convulsed by this collective ambition and belief. And when you come back to the UK, and I wouldn't say there's a linear progression here, or like I kept thinking about it, but when you see ambition die, when you see defeatism, you recognize it because you've been in a place where people really believe that they're building the future.
Yeah.
Right? So why don't I move to San Francisco? I mean, it's very different to here, and for all of the potential and for all of the amazing people and talent out there, I mean, it's the new world, right? There is a pitilessness that I saw there, which I found difficult personally, right? So you talk to these amazing entrepreneurs who want to solve the biggest problems of our time, and you're walking down a street where there might be someone sleeping outside of your front door who's halfway between life and death, and you think, well, what about that problem? Not really so fast, right? And everywhere that I went in San Francisco and California, and don't get me wrong, there are lots of decent people who want to do stuff about that as well as everything else. I don't want to be criticizing. I was struck by the centrality of meritocracy to the American dream and how Americans see themselves. I went for a coffee in San Francisco, best coffee shop you're ever going to go to. You go for a burger, you've got a choice of 2 or 3. People are making a burger shop there. They want it to be the best burger ever, right? It's got to be, nothing else acceptable. And when they do it, this relentless drive to be the best is amazing. And the side of meritocracy that says the best will win out is so powerful and unleashes this amazing achievement. But there's a flip side to the coin, right? There's a dark underside. And that is, if people are at the bottom, I think a lot of what I saw in SF is pretty close to pitiless, right? It was, if you're at the bottom of a meritocracy, what does that say? And I don't, as to my European sensibilities maybe, that was tougher to stomach. My business partner was about to have his first kid when we were out there. And we both loved San Francisco in so many ways. But when you looked at that kind of thing, I remember him saying, I'm not sure how I could explain away these situations to my children. We have our own problems in the UK, right? But anyway, that was my impression as an outsider in an amazing city.
Yeah, it's such a difference, as you say. Like, yeah, you've got these people who want to freeze your brain and turn you into a robot in the future, and you do have this like real desolate poverty problem as well. And it's, I mean, that's a really interesting reflection on the kind of, you have a city of all this ambition, and then you have this kind of the ones that aren't in that kind of group or aren't able to attain that, you kind of get left behind. And obviously, so you returned back to the UK.
I did.
You came back to these shores where there was an ability to switch your energy supply, which is quite critical to your business. So it's good to have you back on the English shores. And of course, many would say then you went to the Y Combinator of the UK, Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
And you went from pitching to Sam Altman to Peter Jones. I mean, that's basically the same level, right?
Well, hang on.
So why did you go? Why, kind of, what was the rationale from going to Dragon's Den?
First thing to say, Peter Jones obviously is a phenomenal entrepreneur.
Oh no, I'm no shade on Peter Jones.
Not many of us reach Sam Altman's heights, but Peter Jones is an absolutely outstanding entrepreneur. Although he made one terrible mistake, of course, in his career, which was failed to invest and look after my
exactly. Yeah,
I'm sure that Peter's kicking himself about that. We did so. Why did we do it? Us doing Dragon's Den, having just completed Y Combinator, is an illustration of one of the most important aphorisms, I think, in startup life. You have everything to gain and you have nothing to lose. People think they've got this reputation, they've got some traction, they don't want to risk it. It's not true. It's not true. If you're ambitious, you've got so much more to gain. You've got so much further to go. You have to take a risk. You have to roll the dice. And when we looked at Dragon's Den, we thought, look, this is potentially a huge audience of people who could literally use our service. And we have got some experience in media because of the way that we'd campaigned and the way that we'd marketed our company for the last couple of years. Therefore, I think the potential reward justifies the risk here.
It's like a reality show for almost, not, I guess your company wasn't quite retail, but yeah, it's like, well, okay, will our viewership pick up on this as well? My dad was telling me about skincare he bought from like, skincare.
Yeah.
You know, touch skincare in your life, so he was influenced.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I believe that Dragon's Den, I think they had a kind of slot where a company came on pitching underpants that had a separate compartment for meat and 2 veg. And so completely bizarre, but that was literally how you kind of find people who want to do that anyway. Yeah. Bizarre stuff. I know, because I know someone who invested in it, and whenever they talk about how well their crypto's doing, to my kind of complete frustration, I always say, well, how about the underpant company? Is that going okay? Anyway, no, it is reality TV. It is reality TV, and having decided to roll the dice and go on to Dragon's Den, I sort of weekend before went to visit my mother, and so darling, what are you up to? What's new? So, well, you never guess it. We're going to go and do Dragon's Den. We're filming next weekend. My mother's face just dropped. She said, Donnie, you can't do it. You'll get humiliated. They're going to find you out. So I was a bit disappointed, but didn't react. I'm a
crazy for your mother.
looked over to my partner. I sort of rolled my eyes, and she went, "Your mum's right.
Oh God,
you shouldn't do it. You could get torn apart." So I had a bit of a wobble, right?
Yes.
But I said to Henry, and we had a chat. We had powwow, my we and we decided, look, we've just got to do it. And 7 days later, we were trudging up to Manchester with our tiny suitcases. And the next morning, very, very early, we were in the famous lift going up to the warehouse to pitch at the Dragons. And I'm afraid it is my solemn duty to tell you guys that the famous lift in Dragon's Den, total fake lift.
Fake lift?
It's a fake lift. It doesn't go anywhere.
You just stand in this
so you stand in there, you stand in the cubicle, and then the numbers...
Did they tell you to look nervous? Or did you just do it?
No, that just came very naturally to us because we were shitting ourselves.
Fair enough.
I remember my mother's words. No, so you stand in a lift, you're nervous about the fact that you're meant to be going somewhere because the higher numbers are illuminating within the lift, but you're aware you're not moving. It's like when you're walking up a kind of travelator, and then the travelator stops and you're still walking, you kind of takes a while. Anyway, I handled it okay. So all I can say is when the doors opened and you look into the den, that was the most surreal moment of my life.
It's quite big, isn't it?
It's pretty big. Yeah. There's smoke all over the room. You've got a huge film crew to your left, and you just walk past them to see 5 minor celebrities on a stage, and you just waddle up, stop 5 meters short, and then as you do, start pitching your heart out about your business idea. And
what's like, obviously by this point, right, you've done multiple pitches, you've had at least 2 very big US kind of titans in the space put the feet up in front of you, and now there's no opportunity for them to do this because there's no table in front, so you're safe there. But like, just walk us through of like how you prepare for that moment. Like, obviously you've had a script ready, you've got your kind of pitch ready, you've got your numbers hopefully all ready in the back, but what's that kind of experience of talking in that environment versus the kind of other pitches you've done?
So the first thing to say is, because this came hot on the heels of Y Combinator, and I had spent the last 3 or 4 months thinking only in terms of FAQs from investors. They're going to ask this, they're going to ask that, what's the answer? So I knew our numbers inside out, just because I had nothing else to focus on, right? I've been in California strictly trying to raise money, and I knew pretty much any question that an investor could be asking, because I was obsessed with it. By the time we got to Dragon's Den, we probably had a lead up to that show and that filming that, to be fair, very, very few of their contestants would have had. A lot of people are just, you're working away on your kind of, on your invention or on your company. This is your first big talk for a while with investors. It's every chance you're going to get caught flat-footed, right? Whereas by contrast, we were very lucky. You know, we had it at just the right time, and we had answers to most of the questions. With that said, we still could have screwed it up. Right? We still could have screwed up. There was a moment when Peter Jones, and this is not on the episode. I'm sure you guys will be rushing off to watch this when you've finished filming the podcast. There's a 15-minute clip of us in the Dragon's Den, but we were in there for like 2 hours. We were in there for 2 hours filming. They asked every single question. They were really, really thorough. And at one point very early on, Peter Jones said, "So you guys are asking for £100,000 in return for 1% of your business. And I understand you've just done Y Combinator. So Y Combinator, how much do they invest?" He goes, and this is masterful from Peter Jones. How much do they invest? Oh, standard actually, Peter. They invest about $120,000. Okay, so that's give or take £100,000, same as what you're asking for us for 1% of the company. So how much did you give to Y Combinator? With Y Combinator, it's equally standard. They give them 7% of the business. 7%. So what percentage did you give to Y Combinator? Obviously, we're the greatest investors in the UK. You're going to give us 1%. So I guess with YC, you give them less than that, right? And Henry and I looked at each other, and this was one question we had absolutely not prepared for. And clearly, there's a part of you which is like, I've got to obscure this. I can't. If I say 7%, he's just going to say, I want 7% too. But we looked at each other, and it's one of those moments where you're kind of accountable to each other as friends who have known each other like half your life. And we both said, we gave them 7%. And Peter Jones said, good lads. Because if you'd lied to me, I'd have sent you straight out of that lift. I know Y Combinator, I know the terms. So thanks for being honest. Next questions. And if we had said the wrong, if someone had thought, I'm going to be clever here, which is 9 times out of 10 not the right thing to do.
Surely they could just look at your cap table afterwards. Surely there's a process with Dragon's Den if the cap table's wrong.
Yeah, but I guess the point is, right, he doesn't care about the numbers, he cares about the people he wants to know. Yeah. Would you lie to him? Would you try and give him the answer he wants?
Yeah.
Because in those moments, right, they're actually assessing the founders more than they're assessing kind of details.
Right.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have stood you, Becca, but you're totally right. It wouldn't have stood up, right? Yeah. They kind of, afterwards, they would look at the cap table and they would say, so why were you guys suddenly so confused? You knew the answer to all the questions, but not this one? It wouldn't have washed.
The 7 looks a bit like a 1. So, we just got confused. Yeah.
No, so that was that one. The other one was, we have been in there for 2 hours negotiating back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. The truth was, we didn't really need the money. We'd raised a couple of $1 million, not a huge amount, but a good amount, when we did demo day at Y Combinator. So we had the money we needed, and £100,000 wasn't going to make a massive difference one way or the other. But when we got to like the 3rd and 4th rounds of negotiation, went to the wall to discuss it, the cameras are on, we've been there for hours. And I said to Henry, look, we had our strategy. We've not quite got the price that we want. We've performed okay. I think we can hold our heads up all right. But I think we have to let it go. Thank God, Henry had the presence of mind to say, for the sake of the story, let's take the deal and let's see what these guys can do for us.
Yeah.
So we took the deal. 3 months later, it was televised. BBC gave it a ton of press because we'd agreed the best deal in the history of the show. And I can promise you, we bombarded Facebook with adverts referring to having got this amazing deal. Yeah. Implication being, if Britain's top investors trust us, you can too. And luckily, hundreds of thousands of people did, and they saved thousands of pounds in the process, right?
It was a very Martin Lewis kind of endeavour as well. Do you like the kind of thing he talked about? I know he gets a lot of press from the BBC as well, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no,
yeah, that's very clever. Like, that point, right? Because you almost have to separate the fact of the deal in the moment with the story, as you say, Henry said. It's so much more powerful for you to say, we got this deal, you can pump that out there, you can leverage it, you build that kind of awareness and trust with not just consumers but other investors, etc. Whereas the story wouldn't have landed so well if it was just like, we got offered it but we rejected it. It
totally doesn't
work.
So that was an insight into running a business with someone who understands campaigns, who understands always how the public will perceive it, and to whom a public's perception makes sense. Right? Some people just don't have that. You meet someone, you work with someone to whom that is innate, and it gives you a superpower. So we were, typically on the right side, or we did the right thing. Right? Our business fundamentally tackled the cost of living. Right? It was called Rip Off Britain in those days, probably 10 years ago. Now we talk about the cost of living crisis, and we did our bit with the market as it existed. And it became very natural for us to tell the story of why we were doing it, and that's why it worked on Dragon's Den. Turns out though, fast forward 7-8 years, the problems of the energy market can't really be solved by getting yourself onto the cheapest price that you can. That means you're not being fleeced for a fat margin. But if the wholesale costs in that bill are high, it doesn't matter whether you've got an angelic energy supplier or a diabolical one. You're going to be paying more than you can afford. And that's where Britain is now.
Yeah, you're trapped in this kind of everything's high, right? And the margins on top of are so small. As you've kind of raised that co-founder, one of the, I think there's a statistic, right? Someone will correct me, but it's, I think, like 2 times, 3 times more likely to succeed as a business or become kind of a unicorn if you have a co-founder or 3 co-founders. How did you go about that experience? You had companies before, right? Which you founded yourself. And then you went with Henry, started up this company. How do you work out that relationship, right? Because it's basically a marriage. You're agreeing to work together in very close proximity, basically spending vast majority of your time together, and at the end of it, split it, and and hopefully agree a good deal that you're both going to be happy with.
Yeah.
Like, how did you go about that, and like what are the positives and negatives you found?
Well, the thing that made that commitment so much easier was I had no idea what it would entail. So everything you've just described is obviously spot on and correct, right? And if you were to co-found a business with someone, you should look at it as being a 10-year journey. At least be ready to spend 10 years talking to that person every day of the week, being accountable to that person and making that person accountable to you, which is why a kind of strong pre-existing relationship, friendship's great, but it could just be a really strong working relationship. That's what you would look for, to know this is a relationship that can withstand the turbulence, which is just that is the kind of natural state of startup life. So working with Henry, my co-founder, was thrilling. It was exciting because I knew what skills he had. There was a concern that because we've been friends for so long, similar background, literally studied more or less the same course at university. The worry was maybe we were too duplicative, if that's the word, in terms of skill sets. Maybe we were, right? But what I learned over the course of 5 years, and something that I discuss with startup founders and people I've mentored here or there, people who've worked at Look After My Bills, is think very hard about your co-founding relationship. It's not just about skills, it's also about personality types. What we didn't realize very early on was that, and what only came out when we did a Myers-Briggs test, like 5 years into the journey, was we were fundamentally the opposite character on every key part of a personality type. The total opposite. Despite always being friends, having gone along for 20 years nearly, we were the opposite. And you would say that makes sense because we were so frustrating. If one of you saying, let's do this, we've got to take action, quick, let's go, I know it's the right thing. And the other one saying, let's stop and analyze this and see if it's the right thing. One's going to be frustrated, the other one's going to feel slightly uncomfortable. But you don't make very many bad decisions, right?
Yeah.
So having had several years of frustration that we had this different approach to problems, we came to understand that maybe that was a source of strength rather than weakness. And I would encourage people to understand the personality types of their co-founders so as to make any differences a strength rather than a weakness.
Really interesting. Yeah. You hear that, like, you need to find that balancing, right? As you say, you have that, you want to pull each other in the different like, uncomfortable directions. You want to be uncomfortable. The whole process is uncomfortable, and you need someone who will take the slack up. Fascinating. And you obviously were friends before. Is your kind of advice to people that if they start a business, it's wise to look for a co-founder, it's wise to kind of entertain that, or having experienced it as working by yourself before? Yeah,
so James, you're very, very sensitively maneuvering me towards a discussion of my first startup, which was not a tremendous success. Honestly, whenever I think about it, I feel as though I want to apologize to the angel investors. It just didn't work, right? And that's a lot of founders, you feel a terrible sense of guilt and shame when things don't work. It just doesn't work. You have to get over it. But I still look back with some regret about it. Here's the pitch, right? It was called Platter, and Platter was the Twitter for food. In other words, you could share what you had just made to eat and tag it by ingredients, and people would have, rather than a full recipe, they could get inspiration for what other people are cooking with ingredients that they might have in their fridge. This was before Instagram came along.
What year was that then?
This is like 2012, 2013. So Instagram, I first heard of when I put out a press release saying we just launched Platter. There was this outlet in the States that said, here are the 5 hottest apps for sharing food right now. And it was like, number 3, Instagram. Number 2, something else. Number 1, Platter. So for a brief moment in time, we were like this kind of hot coming force in social food media, as I like to talk about it. And then, fair to say that Instagram ate our lunch. But I was a solo founder. To James's point, I was a solo founder, and that meant everything relied on me. And when things became really difficult, you try to make someone a co-founder by giving them equity. That won't make them behave like a co-founder. It's not the same thing, right? Much better to see someone behave like a co-founder than you give them equity. Then give them equity first and expect behavior to change. It might not.
Yeah.
And the major thing to say about it is, it was a celebration of food and eating and extravagant food and fun food and normal food and special food. About halfway through my Platter journey, having eaten all this food, I got gout.
Oh God.
One of the most painful conditions a man can experience, right? And food went from being this huge playground to experiment, to enjoy, to being the enemy, right? And as one founder trying to kind of orchestrate
did you
this celebration,
put in a filter for dietary requirements after that?
You could. I mean, that given the kind of the young, fun vibe you're trying to go for, the gout filter was obviously that was something that the feature might have come along a bit later down the line, Becca, but never had the chance, and it just didn't work. Instagram came along. We didn't make clear why we'd use our app rather than the big generalist incumbent, and so. That was it. Failed, flopped.
It's so hard to understand what consumers want without putting something out in the market properly. Because I mean, there's Vivino's, the big kind of wine app where people compare wines and put reviews. It's like almost felt like what's it called, letterboxed for wine. So it could have very much been the case that product. Platter would have kind of taken off in that way, but it's just with consumer habits, people just might not have felt the same way about food. Yeah,
and I think that's spot on. And also, where things got tough, a solo founder might cave in because they give up on the idea themselves. I'm sure they don't want to. I'm sure they feel a responsibility towards their investors. They feel guilty if they can't deliver for investors. But one of the most strongest motivational forces when you are going through the experience of running a startup is you don't want to let your co-founders down. So if you have that dynamic in play, I think people keep going longer and they dig deeper, is my honest belief.
And
There's also an element if you get ill, there's no backstop, right? That you're the backstop. Whereas you can kind of share that kind of responsibility with someone else, and
Completely.
help each other up when someone's down and what have you. Just it's a lot more difficult to do that on your own.
I think it's really good you raise it and really good talk about it, because I think this is it's always nice for people to talk about successes, like what they've gone through, how do they get there, the kind of stages as part of that, but you always know that there's like a happy ending to the story, because yes, you had these experiences with Sam Altman and like crushing, everyone can kind of feel how it must have felt in that moment, but we all know it's got a happy ending. Whereas lots of people will be trying companies, especially nowadays, right? It feels like you've got this window opportunity, AI is providing you an ability to lowers the threshold and the boundary to create new apps, create new technology, but a lot of these are going to fail. Like the market's going to move. There's going to be, OpenAI will just release something which like completely eats your market, and this is a feeling which, if people want to get into the space, you need to accept that 1 week you'll be flying high and feeling like, oh, this is the best thing ever. I'm gonna, can't wait until this company gets to 100 million, and then the next week you're like, oh my god, do I have to file for bankruptcy?
But every week when someone asks you how's it going, crushing it.
Exactly. You got to always.
That's the worst.
Yeah, always. Everything's perfect. Yeah, I mean, I found it like 2 weeks ago. I closed for a company I run. We closed 3 deals in that week, and I finished like, this is great. And then the next week, I was like, oh, what is happening? Like, nothing's going anywhere. I can't get any traction. Like, is it just dead? Is it just not viable anymore? And you go through these like emotions, which if you stand back and look at it as across even just a month, you're like, what, lines going up, good lines going up, but it's relentless, right? And if you don't have that co-founder experience, that's so much harder. I
think the stabilization mechanisms for your mood are vital when you're running a startup. If it's just you in a room on your own or with a team and things go up and down, your mood's going to go up and down. Nothing stabilizes. When I started running a business with a co-founder, we actually operated within a much bigger office, which was run by one of our investors, who had a very, very successful but pretty stable agency. So we'd have our ups and our downs, but we were a rock pool within this ocean that was relatively calm. So it kind of put into perspective these minor tremors and currents in our own little world, when you thought, actually, there is something else that distracts you from it. So having a co-founder will do that. Being exposed to other companies will do that. Having a network will do that. The enemy of the entrepreneur is isolation, for sure. Because it's a natural state. You will drift. You can actually default towards it. You shouldn't.
Very interesting, yeah. And were there like, just very finally on that kind of on platter, were there things that you did which you learnt and you were like, oh yeah, this sets me up? Because one of the key things, right, is learning from failure. Being able to go, yeah, this didn't work because of X reason. I'm going to be aware of that in future. So are there any kind of things you look back on and you're like, oh yeah, that was not how to have done it? And when you did look after my bills, you were kind of aware of that.
Yeah. Do you know what? Everyone's aware of various like guidelines and maxims and mottos for startups. And what's remarkable is a lot of them just play out in your experience. They're not for decoration. They're not bullshit. It's true. And what I lived was, the first startup, you're obsessed with product. It's an expression of yourself. It is you, especially as a solo founder, right? And I was so nervous about putting it into the hands of my users, so nervous about putting it into the hands of influencers like food bloggers, and their opinion of it would be crushing to me. Second startup, right? So let's look after my bills. We get the product right. We don't make mistakes I'd made the previous time. But what we really want is to market it. We want to just push it out there. We get obsessed with marketing. And as a result, got it to hundreds of thousands of users and saved them lots and lots of money in the process. So that was the big lesson. You have to get over the product as the reflection of self. It's not, right?
Interesting, yeah.
Get it into the hands of your users as soon as you can, and make sure you're building something that people want.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because you, like, it's that thing that everyone always talks about, right? If it's like, I'm going to get it out, I'm going to ship. But like, you spent hours behind the scenes working on this thing. It's really tough to actually sometimes like put it out into an environment where it's the most valuable, but if it goes wrong, it's crushing to you just personally, rather than great feedback. But
and should I say also, this is partly a what did I learn as an entrepreneur from first startup, product obsession, second startup, let's market. It's actually partly I had a co-founder, and the co-founder had a very, very different, it was his first startup, right? But he had a different mentality. It was in him to just want to do stuff, right, and get it out there, see what people think. So maybe it wasn't I learned the lesson. Maybe it was just that actually the balance of personalities made happen what needed to happen.
Interesting, yeah. Well, fascinating. We do want to go on to your current roles.
Yes,
you have left. You've sold your startup. You aren't on the beach in Greece at the moment. You are
I've
in
got
the
no
office.
business on the beach anywhere, James. It's not my style at all.
You are now in the office of LFG as COO. Just what led you to LFG? What attracted you, and why are you now spending your days progressing the mission?
Well, it's funny you ask that, because as part of LFG, you sort of meet people who are on the mailing list, who help run our chapters, or who just want to work with us. And you often ask, why LFG? What's drawn you to LFG? And because of the sheer intellectual firepower of some of our contributors, you might always expect some kind of profound policy intellectual answer. I'm deeply passionate about the next generation of small modular reactors, or I've seen the inside of the infrastructure of policy in this country and we need to make it better. That's rarely the answer you get from people who are part of this movement. What they'll talk about is something in their gut. They'll talk about a feeling, an emotion. And it's typically something like this, like, I've always been quietly proud of my country and the past, the contributions it has made to the world, and the future that it offers to me and to my family. And I'm now feeling this nagging sense that we're going the wrong way. And it's been going on for long enough that I feel as though something needs to change. And that's how I feel, right? That's how I feel. I'm very lucky in life. I've had I had really good fortune with a business. I own my own house. I'm relatively comfortable, but even I feel this concern. It's not even a concern, it's a cocktail of emotions, right? I still feel a pride in my country, in in the people who are part of this country. But I also feel an anxiety, right? I feel sometimes a sadness about it. At times there's even a trace, none of us are above feeling a little bit of anger sometimes. And what LFG does is it allows you to process those feelings and those emotions into something constructive, into something positive that might actually put this country on a better path. So many people talk about being short-term pessimistic about Britain, but long-term optimistic. And the only way that you can reconcile those two statements is if there's an inflection, as if something changes. And meeting Lawrence and seeing from afar what LFG had done made me believe that LFG is part of what is going to happen to reconcile those two things and reach an inflection point.
And what is kind of the mechanism of LFG kind of, because one angle people would often take it of is like, if they'll join a political party and they'll see that as the route to kind of enacting change, and that would have been in your gift. But instead, like, LFG is obviously a very particular vehicle. Like, it's politically neutral. It's trying to be a movement of trying to like make the case for growth, and it's as I say, cross-party, not interested in getting involved in politics, but just like forcing the right party or the governing party to take action. Why did that attract to you rather than go down the normal typical political route?
I'm just not that tribal a person. And I've never thought I want my side to win over their side. I've always felt much more comfortable thinking that this is what I believe. Let's push that as far as we can. And if people come on board, that's great. If they don't, too bad. So that really appealed with LFG, that you wouldn't have to be bound by the strictures of your party's policies. And instead, more than that, we're creating space for any political party to deliver the policies that's going to bring us economic growth. I find that hugely appealing. And I do think that it's a way of shaking politicians out of their tribal myopia. They say, look, we can all agree on this, surely. And I just feel as though building a consensus across party lines on the things that need to change is something that has to happen if you turn around the course of this country. Has to.
So, I find it interesting because you were talking about how lots of people might have an ideas, like ideas aren't that kind of valuable in itself, and it's the execution of that. And something that I know I love about going to LFG events, and I love about the LFG community, is that everyone's kind of come to the same conclusion on what's wrong with the UK, in, you know, to a certain extent. And there's people from the left, there's people from the right, and but they want a vehicle to be able to help. And I don't know, that's why I kind of love LFG and why I co-host this podcast. And yeah, I just wondering your thoughts on that, because I think the community and actually getting people mobilized and being a vehicle for that is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the people, right, who form LFG, by which I mean the community, the people you see at the events, the people who are on the mailing list, who reply back to emails with like some of the most coruscating, just penetrating ideas. It's amazing. And I think what Lawrence is trying to build is a movement for growth, right? It's a popular movement for growth. But we should never lose sight of the fact that there's this razor sharp group of people who know the policies that need to change inside out, and they can make a difference at the highest level. And LFG has very good relationships with them. We know we can talk not in the platitudes that you associate with politicians who have to chase votes, but a lot of what Lawrence says is that we have the luxury of not ever wanting election or re-election. So let's work out the policies that the country needs. And the amount of times that you meet people who just have this phenomenal knowledge and experience, lived experience of what it's going to take to turn around the country. And we're able to have that razor-sharp cutting edge at a policy level with a huge movement behind, the weight of a huge movement behind it. And the combination of those two things is what makes me so optimistic about what LFG can accomplish in the next few years. The other thing I'd like to mention, actually, and part of what drew me to LFG was it's going to take a bit of courage to do this. A lot of these things are going to seem obvious in a few years' time, I believe, right? But 5 years ago, controversial. Now, you're going to have friends who are going to disagree with you about it. And to put your head above the parapet and make the case for these changes takes courage. So it's not just what Lawrence has done with LFG, it's also his background, like campaigning around XL bullies, right? It's kind of, that takes courage, right? To have done that. You can imagine some of the attention he got. And I take my hat off to him for that. It takes that. He's not, he's about this life. He doesn't just talk about it, he backs it up. And that's the kind of person that I think a lot of us who are part of LFG really want to get behind.
He also turns policy documents into real format, which is comprehensible for me, so that's why I like it.
It's an art, yes.
It is an art.
Although one thing that Lawrence didn't do is he didn't come up with the name LFG or Looking for Growth.
Oh, I actually don't know who did.
That is a tribute to your co-host.
That's brutal, Becca. That's brutal.
No. So I think take us through.
Yeah.
You know the phrase. There's no end to what you can achieve if you don't mind who takes the credit.
And I didn't know that, but
Yeah.
Okay.
Where did it come from then?
Do you know?
It came from me, Joe, and Lawrence were trying to think of a good name. We had very many bad names. I had suggested many bad names. No one looked at what stats between us. There was lots of things that didn't stick. And then 3 a.m. I woke up, and some of my best ideas have been at 3 a.m. I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was like, it would be so good if we could get the acronym to be LFG. That's hilarious. And I was like, we're all about growth. So there's G's in there. I just need to look for. And it was 3 a.m. and I got the message on WhatsApp. I was like, I can't go to sleep now, forget it, or this might be a dream. And I sent it to him and I went straight back to sleep.
Do you remember it in the morning?
Yeah, I woke up in the morning and I saw the text from Lawrence and Joe, and they were like...
And that was the moment that everything changed.
Yeah, that was the moment. I was like, I've done my piece. I can now sit back and it's my contribution.
But it's the reason it's genius, right? Is it kind of encapsulates the belief, the can-do attitude, and the fundamentally forward-looking nature of LFG. Whereas you see a lot of kind of alternative visions for Britain. It's like this, turn back to that. And I don't think, and I understand that. I understand it. But what LFG has is this kind of belief and courageous faith in the future, which I love. And I think it means you can take on these debates, right, and sort of slay a few sacred cows.
I think it's also on that hook, but it's so important from my side because the past is no prediction, it is no guarantee of the future. And yes, people will look back and say, I really enjoyed. There's a lot of rosy retrospective views that people have about like, how good it was in the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, and we should go back to that. And sure, there are parts where you might want to cherry pick those, but fundamentally we should be looking forward to like, what is the future holding? Like in the 60s, we did not have transformational AI technology, which like PhD levels. So systems which we had back then will not be appropriate for today. And we need to be thinking about what's the future we want to build. And this is what we really lack in, I think, a lot in politics, is this vision of like, where do I want the country to be? What is the country I want to see and have? And that's the kind of central thing of LFG, is to try and help form that and be like, we don't need to just hark back and say we were better 60 years ago, let's go back there. It's actually to say, well, what do we want our country to look like in 10, 20 years?
And that's why, I mean, for us, I think a key part of the vision, if you had to set up what LFG is trying to achieve in a phrase, you'd say we're trying to build a better future for Britain. That means building infrastructure. It means building companies. It means building trust. But building is at the heart of all this stuff. And there's so much to build on. Right? The foundations that we have in this country are strong. If you look at, I'm an entrepreneur by background. I'm a middling entrepreneur. This country creates brilliant entrepreneurs, amazing entrepreneurs by the shed load. We gestate AI genius regularly. The challenge for us is, how do we persuade the next generation of great entrepreneurs to scale up their business and keep their business in Britain?
Do you think it's a persuasion though, or is it a kind of creating the environment where they can viably build? I
think it's the same thing. I'm trying to say the same thing, but I mean, you guys must have discussed it on the podcast before. And what do you think?
I think it's creating an environment where you can viably build. I guess there's some element of you need to create that culture, and I think entrepreneurialism is very, very contagious. Like I would never really have thought of kind of starting a company, and I'm still kind of, but I can see that more in my future now than I did before being around so many entrepreneurs. So I think there is that cultural element to it. But I think ultimately, like, I think because I work with so many scale-ups as well, like, what do you want the scale-ups to solve in the UK? You want it to solve, I mean, firstly at the moment is unemployment, especially for young people. And you want, I guess you want them to pay more tax and build industry so we can have something to work off. And I think ultimately a lot of that is, okay, well, how do you decrease business costs? And I think a lot of that comes down to why we have national insurance, which is a tax for businesses to employ people. Which I guess that's my main kind of thing in the scale up environment I'd like to change. Yeah,
I think that's right. Sort of when you look at, I don't want to call them a lost generation, but people use the phrase a lost generation, young people in Britain who have not worked, haven't really known work, and you see the rise of personal independence payments, and quite aside from the cost of that on the state, it's actually ironically named, isn't it? Personal independence. It's a good point. But obviously for some people, totally vital, right? And I think concentrating on them is important, but what you want is for people to have the prospect to work, and Look, I don't want to link those things explicitly, but what I do know is that you want young people to have the opportunity to just move through the gears in life, right? To kind of move out from home, right? To get a job, to find, I don't say this glibly, but it takes a few years to find your purpose, what you're good at, to find a mentor, to become a mentor, you know, to get your own place if you want to have a family if you want to. And for so many people, they've made peace with that not being possible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is soul
Well,
destroying.
I don't think they've made
That's
peace.
soul
I think,
destroying.
yeah. Well, I guess the soul's destroyed. Yeah.
I think it's a stake in the future of the country, right? It's actually like, I find all this stuff is, and there's a whole episode we could do on that as well. Like from the education system and how that I think has failed a lot of young people to prepare for the future, the life they're going to have, the opportunities they could have, and businesses not being able to access that. You've got a big disconnect there. But it's the detriment is not just that we can't have people who are now kind of going straight into the benefit system or just unemployed, etc. But they have no stake in the country. They have very little to say. Well, this is why I care about it being better. This is why I want to get involved and do something and have agency and help make it better. Because why would you? When you can't afford a house, you can't find a job, you can't afford a family. Like, things are just shut off from you entirely. And I think, yeah, that's hopefully what we can start cracking with LFG is just kind of bringing it back to the point of we need a country which is growing, and you can get involved in that. And one of the things I love about LFG, and people often ask about the kind of clean-ups and how that's related to growth, and it's all about this kind of agency point of you need to have a stake in your local area, you need to have a stake in your country improving, and this is one of the low-cost, easy ways of doing that. Sure, there are lots of other things you could do, but this is also just a thing on a weekend when you've got nothing else to do. Go out to the park and help clean up, get to graffiti.
That's why I think this movement has such potential, right? It's, when we talk about looking for growth, we're talking fundamentally and originally about economic growth. But when you look at what LFG's achieved and you look at the spirit that it engenders in people, if someone's picking litter from their park, or I don't know, giving company to a lonely old person, or just doing something around just solving a problem with a bit of agency, a bit of can-do attitude, that isn't necessarily economic growth directly, but it is personal growth. It is a mindset which is fundamentally different to defeatism and what's the point. And the great threat over the next 10 years is there's a mindset of nihilism, of what's the point? Let's have a soft life. We can't give in to that. And I think that so much of what LFG does, it puts its finger on not just economic policies, right, but a social outlook and a mindset which says no to victimhood and yes to ownership and yes to pragmatism and a fundamental just bit of belief in what we can do, a certain amount of pride in the good things this country has done in the past. And that is a release for so many people who have come to think that actually Britain's a terrible country whose best days are well behind them too, and there's no hope. It's just not true. And the whole agenda for LFG, whether it's building companies, building infrastructure, or encouraging people to actually volunteer, to give their time, to go out something to make their community better. That's almost the biggest thing of all. It's like building trust. And if I was a young person in this country today, I wouldn't cast myself, I can't quite count myself as such these days, but young people have got every reason not to feel that much trust in so much of what happens in this country, right? So do you then surrender those people to a kind of worldview where everything's against them, and the only way to do anything about it is to join a kind of really out there wacky party? Or do you say, what can we do to build your trust in the system? What can we do to make you feel better about the balance of the price you paid for your education and the earning prospects that you've got in return? How to make you feel better about how you're going to live, like where you're going to make a life for yourself in this country? And I think that I'm excited that LFG can make that case for younger people, and keen that we do it.
Well, I think that's an excellent line to finish on. You've risen my spirits late in this day. So I just like to say thank you so much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And great to have you on board, running LFG.
You got to say it
thank you
now.
so much.
Let's fucking go.
Come on, man.
Looking for growth.
Yeah, that's the one. Thanks so much. Will.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Cheers, Becca.